In this video, we'll see how to manage simultaneous changes made by two developers. Let's start with the first developer. To start changes, the developer will do a fetch of the feature branch from the remote repository. The developer can create a new branch, can check out the master, or as you see here today, check out a feature that's already being worked on. It depends on the task at hand. When it's done, the developer can begin their changes. Today, this developer will make changes to a CLLE called ORD100C. It's a simple change. The developer will just add a few instructions to this code. Once it's done, the developer will save the changes, and now we'll make changes to the CLLE PAR201. What we'll do there is we'll change the length of the field path from 100 to 115. And again, we'll save our changes. The next thing we'll see is the developer launch a build. Now this build will create a sandbox version within ARCAD called sb.00.00. And when the build is finished, that version will contain all the sources and objects impacted by the changes done. Now, the developer can test these changes, make further changes, and so on. Here, you can see the version that's been created and the components that have been added to it. Now, we'll switch and we'll watch the second developer work. This developer did a fetch of the same feature branch as the first developer, but he received a version of sb.00.01. This is their own sandbox version linked to the same feature branch as the first developer. Now they can develop independently. As you see in the source, this developer does not see the first developer's changes. In today's example, the second developer has finished their changes. They'll now commit and push them. First, they'll stage the changes that they've made for the commit. Here, you can see the developer providing a commit message. Then, the developer selects the option to push these changes to the remote repository. Both developers changed CLLE ORD100C. The second developer changed the length of the field CUID, so it's not the same instruction as the first developer. On the CLLE PAR201, they changed the length of the field path, but they used a different value. They changed it to 105. So there is a conflict here. Once they've staged their changes and done the commit and push, they can execute a build. Now remember, this developer has updated the feature branch. This build is being done over the feature branch into the feature version. This will update the feature version with what he's done on his sandbox branch. During this build, you can access the logs and see everything that's happening behind the scenes. Here, you can see the source and components that have been created in the feature version. If we go to the remote repository, we can now see that the feature branch has the changes that have been done by the second developer. Remember, we have two developers working, so let's switch back to the first developer and see what happens now. So here we are back with the first developer, who's also now ready to commit and push their own changes. But before they do, they'll execute a pull. That will alert them of any conflicts. In this case, they'll see the conflict on the CLLE PAR201. Before looking at the conflict, the developer is taking a look at CLLE ORD100C. As you can see, the changes by both developers are within this source. You can see the length of CUID field has been changed, and you can see the new instructions. Now, when the developer looks at PAR201, you can see the conflict. The developer can now resolve the conflict by deciding which changes to keep. The developer might also resolve the conflict by making further changes, as you see here. Normally, the developer would now build the project again and retest, but today, we'll just stage the changes and then commit and push them. As before, the developer will enter a commit message and then take the options to perform the push. Once the push is complete, the developer will launch an ARCAD build to have the final components built into the feature version. As always, you can look at the logs as the build is running to see what's happening. You can also see the components being replaced. You'll see the name preceded by double exclamation points. Those will go away once the component is recompiled. When the build finishes, we can once again go to the remote repository, and we can see in the feature branch that the changes done by both of the developers are now present. You can see that the path field in PAR 201 has a length of 110. You can also see the changes to the field CUID and the new instructions in ORD 100C. It's important to note that to have this behavior during the pull action, it's mandatory for the developer to check auto stash in the Git part of the preferences. If this option is not checked, the pull action will send a warning message in the case of conflicts, and the developer will have to do the stash manually. What you've just seen is conflict resolution and concurrent development using Merlin and Arcad. Thank you for watching. For other movies and more information, please visit our website at www.arcadsoftware.com.